Okay, so we're going to shift gears. We're about halfway through our time today, so we're going to use our remaining 30 minutes to tackle veggies, and then we are going to wrap up with our last fruit questions. Does that sound good, fruit and veggie gang? We sound good? We ready?
Oh,
Okay.
there were lots of great vegetable questions this time.
Yes, so many. Okay, so let's start with this one comes in from Bradley County. They say, I've noticed two limbs with yellowing leaves and two otherwise healthy looking tomato. On two otherwise healthy looking tomato plants. The yellow spots are in the web of the veins. The veins are still green. I have removed these limbs. They were both on the lower part of the plant, and they are curious as to what's going on. What are some of the potential things that they can do um, to help manage this problem? So I'm going to share the picture if y'all want to pick up for us from there.
All right. So, first of all, congratulations on having two largely healthy looking plants at this point in a crazy year. And looking at this picture, this is a great image. You did a really good job of kind of capturing where on the plant those are. And with lower limbs, lots of times what we're going to be looking at here is a potential magnesium deficiency. And so this has to do with how plants move some nutrients and don't as really have the ability to move other nutrients. So magnesium is one that has the ability to be translocated during the growth of the plant. So when we see this interveinal chlorosis, and magnesium is a crucial element in chlorophyll, the pigment that makes the leaves green, and so it is actually moving magnesium up to its more actively growing part. So when we see this on lower leaves, we don't really consider it a problem. Now we want to make sure that we're balancing all of our nutrients and that this doesn't indicate, a pH problem and all those other things. But this is actually something that on, rapidly growing plants, we will see. So when it's lower like this, we think magnesium. Now, if this type of interveinal chlorosis was at a different part of the plant, like say the upper leaves, we might think iron, and it would be a different thing. But I think, if this is your biggest tomato problem right now, the signs are good that you may be having a very good tomato season.
Excellent. And this is a question that I had in my own head as you were talking is, do we see this more like, I'm just trying to think, like, as the plant is like putting on its fruit loads, is it more common to see this at that point in time? Or, you know what I mean? Like, is it taking more and that's why we're seeing a deficiency, or no?
Well, so I mean, magnesium is going to be more of a constituent of, leaf growth. It
Okay.
wouldn't be as much, potassium is what we think of as being a really needed nutrient when we're doing a lot of fruit fill. But I would consider this like this is what I used to see a lot in hydroponic tomatoes, indeterminate tomatoes that had a very long growing season. As the plants were continuing, we'd see this on some of the older leaves. And now you're getting me geeky. Are For the most part, our leaves above our fruit clusters are going to be doing the photosynthesis that is providing the sugars in the photosynthesis. Like for the most part, it's going to be those leaflets that are, a couple above that fruit cluster. So we're not as much moving sugars up as we are moving sugars down. So once
Mm,
our plant has, grown up above, we're not getting a lot of use out of those leaves. So they're not critical.
good. That was my brain. I was thinking too deep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dr. Bumgarner, I've also noticed that on those indeterminate tomatoes that when we're pruning those leaves below those clusters, we never notice that magnesium deficiency because those leaves are not there anymore.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, we're going to move on to another because we've got several to knock out here in rapid succession. This question, oh, this is coming in from Knox County, Middle Tennessee. I've been seeing some odd growth on the new leaves of my tomatoes. It has been dry and hot lately. Do you think that this could be drought stress? So let me pull up the picture so that we can know what we're looking at here and share my screen. And here we go. What are we
So,
thinking?
so
I'm
I'll say, what were you going to say, Celeste? Jump in
I
there.
was I was gonna say that that doesn't look like drought stress to me. I was gonna say it might be herbicide related. It's looking pretty twisted, pretty gnarled and curled. We know tomatoes are our indicator plant, so we can see damage on tomatoes while we don't see damage on other plants in our vegetable garden for 2,4-D products specifically. So I don't know. What do y'all think? That's just first thing that came to my head.
I would say oxen mimic. I'd say herbicide damage. You know, I will say, just looking at that garden, it's clean as a pin at what we can see. I wonder what we've done around the borders or in proximity of controlling weeds and such. But that looks like herbicide damage to me.
Yeah, and Greg, a lot of times we always think of herbicide damage being that drift, application during maybe a windy day, but I see in that raised kind of furrow area, maybe they put some compost in that soil that maybe had some residues of herbicide as well. So it's a lot of times we got to think critically if that's a drift issue or maybe even within the residual activity of the soil.
Yeah.
So that's a good point.
Okay.
And while it wasn't part of the question specifically, we don't know if they use compost in this particular situation or not. But let's talk about that for a minute and how we can have herbicide residual in potential manures, composted manures that we're adding to our gardens. Um, Greg, do you want to take us through that? I know
Yeah,
that's
that's a
a
cattle
favorite
question.
topic. That's a favorite topic of
Well,
yours.
so, some herbicides, when we apply them, as bad as what we hear, how horrible glyphosate is. Glyphosate's one that actually binds in the soil almost immediately. There is really no residual whatsoever with that herbicide. However, other herbicides, like some of these oxymimics that we've discussed, 2,4-D, dicamba, if you were looking at some of our pastures where we use picloram or aminopyrrolid, that are herbicides that we use that are have longer residuals within the soil, so they do a longer time of killing those weeds. Well, if we harvest that hay, if we spray a hay field in a time, and we try to educate farmers on how soon that they can cut that hay. But if we were to cut that hay really close to an application of some of these herbicides, we can actually move that herbicide off site within that hay. These oxymimics are very, very water soluble. They'll move through water effortlessly. And if we fed that hay to horses or cattle, it'd move right through their system out onto the ground. If you collected that manure and you put that in a compost bed and used it as a fertilizer or as just a compost in general for a soil amendment, you could still have the residual of that herbicide in that manure. And those plants, some plants are more sensitive than others, and tomatoes are the canary crop. If there's a problem there, they're going to find it. And so they're very sensitive to those herbicides, and they can be damaged from that herbicide being moved off site. So that's why you've got to have a little bit of an idea. Most of the time, if that hay or grass is sprayed and you have enough time that it moves through the system and out of the system, you won't have a problem. So a little bit that's on the management of the farmer, but it's also on the responsibility of the homeowner to have an idea of where that compost is coming from and what's been done to it.
Yeah. So Greg, if I borrowed compost from you and you were like, yeah, it's awesome, it'll make your plants go great, and you wanted to get it tested to make sure it doesn't have any herbicide residuals, just go ahead and get you a little transplant of tomato or pepper and just pop it in there, see if it has any curling of the leaves that we kind of showed in that picture Celeste showed. Lee, I saw you were about to jump in.
So I know it's scary. I'm talking about vegetables, right? No.
Oh.
So what I was going to bring up is we might also want to reference that new publication W1237 that Becky Bowling that just talked about, that glyphosate is moving out of Roundup products. So if you're still using those same Roundup based products, they may not actually have glyphosate in them anymore, and they may have some of those more harsh chemicals, diquat, triclopyr. So anyway, just a thought. Next time you pick up, a typical Roundup bottle, it may not be the same product.
It won't be the same product.
I
It
was gonna
will
say, it
not
won't
be
be.
the same
Yeah,
product. So you
as of
cannot
right now.
You cannot
Yeah.
indiscriminately use Roundup branded products in the same fashion that you have in the past because they contain more and different active ingredients. So you must read the label. Do not use it in the same fashion, as you have in the past. So just be very vigilant about that. Now, if you for sure want glyphosate and glyphosate alone, you can still get that, but you have to go to like farm supply type stores. Not available at box stores, not at Walmart's, at Lowe's, at Home Depot. No more glyphosate. Okay.
So Lee, man, that is an exceptional observation. And I could see a homeowner spraying what they used to do, a burn down band around a garden using glyphosate and have no problem whatsoever.
Yep.
And use quote unquote the new Roundups. It's using an auxin mimic that easily volatilizes in temperatures above 85 degrees, drift out, move to something, and easily kill sensitive plants around just because the volatilization in those warm temperatures.
And
That'll
glyphosate does have a different pattern than a lot of those auxin mimics that we'll see. Now, if they have multiple, multiple modes of action, then it's, you could get a combination. But glyphosate alone will show something different than that leaf distortion, those vein, distortion. That will not be typically, what a glyphosate will show as an herbicide damage.
Yes, good points. Okay, good conversation. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, I'm skipping down our sheet, y'all, because I feel like since we were just talking about compost and manures and things like that, we have a question that kind of goes along with that about peppers. So this question came into us from Davidson County. I'm going to share my screen real quick. They said they, been growing peppers for years. This is a jalapeno pepper. This year when they amended their garden soils, they added some good quality manure compost, and their plants are looking great and they don't have any fruit. So, what are our thoughts, vegetable team?
Oh, prolific growth and low fruit production. A lot of times we'll think high nitrogen and we're pushing vegetative growth on the plant. I mean, we see a beautiful, healthy plant there. I'm also seeing kind of long internode length on that plant. So I also might think light and kind of asking a little bit about what kind of light conditions you're seeing. Greg, Seth are nodding. Were those your first thoughts?
Absolutely. And the fact that you had the weeds at what you had growing in that compost, really, really high fertility, and then you just hit the nail on the head, seeing that branching so long in those nodes. It looks like it's a little bit lower light. And Natalie, if you would talk a little bit while we're on this subject about temperature and bud set and some of that, because physiologically, with the temperatures that we've had, there could be a lot of other fruits that we basically see a decline in fruit production and fruit set just because of these really high temperatures that we've had.
That's also true that whether we're talking about beans, whether we're talking about tomatoes, I mean, bell peppers, I would think of more than jalapeno peppers, but there you may be seeing situations where you're having low fruit production. And what happened is you had a bloom, there was heat or drought stress, and that bloom dropped off, and you're still getting no fruit. Now the plant was blooming, but it just wasn't getting, of course we get high temperatures and that messes with the fertilization and the pollination process and things like that. I mean, I know when I'm working in my tomatoes, I'm actually seeing bloom drop on some of those. So that can be whole range of environmental factors. Yeah, good point, Greg.
I do see homeowners though that over fertilize, especially with nitrogen, and those plants stay vegetative and don't set as much fruit as they would like or need. I especially see it with beans, but it can be seen in other fruit crops, and I think that's what we're seeing here with the tomato or the peppers.
Awesome.
You'll have the most beautiful bushy green tomato plant.
Yes, but maybe not many tomatoes. No, I'm just so anyway, it'll be better next year. Don't feel like in this particular, situation, those nutrients are going to be used by the plant. Nitrogen is used pretty rapidly. So don't feel like you're destined to have beautiful plants and no fruit forever.
You
So
got a
that
lot of
will
season left. There's time.
Yes. Yes, there is time.
Yeah.
So this is a quick and easy one in this veggie range. Is it too late to plant pumpkin seeds? And if not, how much sun do they need? So I'll volunteer an answer. So pumpkins like full sun, at least 6 hours of direct sun. And it's not too late. You can go ahead and plant some seeds. It depends on what your purpose is for it though. So, if you were trying to um be growing some pumpkins and gourds to sell in early fall, the beginning of October, I'd say you've missed your boat. If you were wanting to grow some pumpkins to have some jack-o'-lanterns for you and your family to have for Halloween, I'd say you're still good. And also to pay close attention to whatever cultivars you are using, because some of them have a wide variation in the days to maturity that it takes for that pumpkin or gourd to get from seed to harvest. So you might be looking at something that's like a 90-day, and a very similar looking cultivar might have 120 days. So just make sure you check that. Okay, so that was
Yeah.
quick and easy.
And water well. I mean,
Yeah.
you got plenty of time, but this is a challenging time to start seeds and transplants.
Yeah, and if you're Celeste in West Tennessee, if you're in the upper Northeast or here on the plateau, understand if you're going to do that, it better happen like immediately because
Good point.
we're
I didn't
gonna
even think
have
about that. I'm like, we got plenty of time. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead
they
and
got
print
plenty of
them.
time there in West Tennessee. We don't have plenty of time here on the plateau or the upper Northeast of Tennessee.
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
that question
Good.
actually came from Hamilton County,
did.
so that's about the warmest spot that we have in East Tennessee. Yeah.
Good. Good.
Yeah, according to
Sometimes they're warmer than I am.
Oh yeah, according to our
Maybe-
planting chart, last day is July 15th, and I'll drop that publication in here too. So get it in the ground.
Great weekend for
3
pumpkin.
days. You've got 3 days. Okay,
on
let's
it.
see. Oh, this is a really good one. I thought this was a good picture. Okay, so this comes to us from Knox County. Can I use a copper spray to eliminate this issue? And will I be able to use the cucumbers? So it's a cucumber plant. They're not sure what's going on. I guess maybe copper is just an item they have on hand. I don't know, and are wondering if it will help with anything. I don't know, fruit and vegetable people. Y'all tell me what you
Well,
think. I don't know.
I think that there's room on the pull up the picture for us, and I'll say these are our favorite kinds of questions because I feel like it's the trifecta that could be occurring on this plant. So when we see circular spots like we're seeing right there that sometimes have the center dropping out, and anthracnose, now there are many leaf diseases that can impact cucumbers. So as a horticulturist, I want to be highly cautious in like visually saying, oh yeah, that could be anthracnose. But so it's the potential that there's a little bit of fungal disease there. But honestly, when I look at some of the surrounding edges of those plants and a few of the leaves that are kind of showing some that lower right, yeah, right there. So Seth, I actually then kind
Cucumber
of move
beetle.
away from fungal. Yeah.
Oh yeah, is that
What-
where you're getting at, Natalie?
Yeah,
Cucumber
yeah.
beetle. Yep. And we all know cucumber beetle transfers diseases as well when it chews on that plant material and transfers that virus in it. So a lot of times that can come up as well. And a lot of times we always think our homeowners and growers and whatever scale, we always want an answer of like, what can I spray? What can I apply? And a lot of times we got to get critical on this. And so copper would not do anything, if you would agree with that, Natalie, on controlling anything here.
Well, I mean, maybe for that anthracnose on one leaf, but I think that the insect feeding and the potential bacterial are
Yeah.
probably going to be your more severe issue.
And we've
So,
got
yeah.
quite a bit of stippling here as well. I feel like,
Yeah.
see all these little bitty, light colored specks. So, that's a whole nother insect with a sucking, piercing mouth part. I mean, like Natalie said, trifecta. We've got them all three: chewing, sucking, and possibly disease. So, but I mean, they don't look that bad to possibly have the trifecta.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
my
I mean, this
cucumbers
is-
look a lot poorer than this, and they
yeah,
are
Oh, yeah.
still
This is a
pumping
triple.
out some
Yeah.
cucumbers. Yeah.
Yeah.
And back to
So
the cultural practices, I'm kind of looking in between there. I'm wondering about the spacing here, and we always make sure spacing's good on these cucumbers because they need more room than we always think. So any way to improve that airflow and circulation and help to remove some of these plant diseases and insects on the forefront too is always important. But yeah.
So an insecticide spray, and as we get into this, I'm gonna lead into this, and then Seth can follow up. We probably have blooms occurring right now, so our spraying needs to really be intentional, not to be in pollination and bee times of day. So early or late if we're gonna be spraying for them. I actually sprayed for cucumber beetle last night at like 8:45 when I didn't see any bee movement.
awesome. Okay, we've got 4 more questions, and I have a feeling we can get them all in before we wrap things up this morning. So one more vegetable focused question. So this comes to us from Rutherford County. With the heat as bad as it's been, even with morning watering, so they are watering this garden space in the morning, their vegetable plants are wilted by midday. Is this an extreme danger to them? Would midday watering be worth it? Or does that do more damage than good? These are plants that she this I don't know who I don't see a name for who's Sarah. Okay, so she is growing these plants for the UT trials, and she wants to make sure that she is taking care of them as well as she can. And so I will pull up some pictures here, but let's just go ahead and start talking about thoughts of midday wilting and what might be going on here.
So there are 2 thoughts that I have to kind of get us started. One would be the media, and are we talking about such a rapidly draining like raised bed type of media that we may not have a real high water holding capacity? Because if we're watering in the morning and we're by midday, we've already kind of lost all that water, we may be wanting to think about what might be some compost or peat or some types of materials that could be applied that have a little bit higher water holding capacity, or maybe we need a larger volume in the raised bed or container that we're growing in so that we have more water holding capacity. And so I know those are things that we can't necessarily do anything about right now. But when I think about a morning watering starting to, not really make it to the end of the day, I start to think about capacity and things like that. Now, that being said, when it's 94 degrees outside with a heat index of 103 or whatever, like especially on cucumbers, and I see those okra, and I mean, you're gonna get a little bit of leaf.
Wilt, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's where I was going with this. I mean, and even if there is adequate moisture in the soil, those vegetables of ours that have really big leaf area surfaces are losing water more rapidly than say your small leaf things. So say like your peppers have teeny tiny leaves, or beans sometimes have this mechanism, or peas, where they can curl their leaves over to retain moisture. So we won't necessarily see a lot of wilting, but you might see a little folding in the middle of the day during those high heat situations. But if you are watering in the morning and there's adequate soil moisture present, but your plants are still wilting midday, would be my suggestion. Wait until the next morning and have those plants revived before you water the next morning. You see what I'm saying? So nighttime comes, those plants get a break, they have a little time to take up more moisture through their roots. They're just losing it during the day through their leaves so quickly they can't keep up. So if they've revived in the morning, I'd say that your watering levels are fine. It's just an issue of losing too much more moisture than the plant can take back up.
Okay, so I've got a question. When you say you're watering, how much are you watering? The fact that you're watering every day, every morning, okay, most of the time I recommend more infrequent watering, but longer watering periods. So you work moisture deeper into the soil profile. If you're watering every morning in just a little bit of a short window, you may be only watering just the crust surface that is very quick to evaporate, and then that water is gone
Good
very,
point.
very quickly from the environment. So when people water, whether it's a soaker hose or sprinkler out or a drip system, I try to tell people use something, a pie pan, anything to collect to see how much water you're actually putting out to that plant. And, so they need at least an inch, as hot as it's been here of late, maybe an inch and a half or a little bit more. But I would break that up into 2 or maybe 3 waterings and water more as opposed to every day and just little bitty amounts.
Good
That's an
point.
excellent point. And one other
Yep.
thing about the crazy season that we've had is that with a cooler and moister May, it put us in the position where we may not have had a real deep root expansion early in the season because they didn't need it. And then, goodness, when it came, and we may have had some plants that didn't have as deep a root system, which could be due to the season and could be due to exactly what Greg just said too.
Yeah, and the other opposite spectrum of that, if they say, well, no, I'm watering an inch every time I do. Well, then we can have a plant that can actually look wilty when we overwater that plant too much. So I don't think that would be the case. I would think I would lean more towards we're watering it every day, but we're not getting water deep enough into the soil profile for that plants.
Awesome. Okay, we've got a few minutes. Let's get some fruit questions in here right at the last. So let's start with this blackberry question. This comes in from Ray County. Um, they're wondering how can they make their blackberries taste better? Sometimes they're well, they specifically said wild blackberries, but I have the same issue with cultivated blackberries as well. They taste bitter. Um, what are some suggestions? What are we thinking? I know what I'm thinking. I read an article that I thought this is so ironic this question came in because I actually read an article from Arkansas Extension about this very issue just like a week ago. So I was like, oh, I know the answer to that one real quick, but I'm going to let somebody else take the floor.
Sounds like more home garden trials, right?
Oh,
I don't know. Thoughts? You want me to jump in?
I know what you're
Okay.
gonna go with,
Okay.
Celeste, but your note definitely is important. But on the other thing too is those wild blackberries, you know, we they're not bred for taste, right?
Mm,
And the sugar content, and they're just out there.
doing their thing.
Yeah. So I mean,
Making seeds, making
not
some big
much we
old
can do,
seeds.
right? And you can see in that picture, I'm pretty sure they're a thorn
Oh,
variety too. And
yeah,
a
let
lot of
me pull
times we
that up.
want our domesticated cultivars to be put in without a wild blackberry within a mile radius, if that's even possible, because they're gonna potentially spread diseases. There we go. There's that picture of it. And then you see some discoloration, and the berries aren't really true to size that we want. And so just want to throw that out there that if you do really want good tasting blackberries, we should just go ahead and put in a domesticated one. And then what she's zooming in on, Celeste, you're the winner on that one.
Oh, okay. Well, so the thing that I was gonna bring up is that stink bug damage or feeding can actually, I'm sorry, can actually cause those berries to be quite bitter. So, I have a beautiful Arapaho, I believe it is, and they've got beautiful berries, and I'll pick a whole bucket of them, and we're just eating them, me and the kids. And the first 4 or 5 are great, and then the next 3 or 4 are awful. And it's just, you never know what you're going to get. One of them tastes great, one of them tastes awful. And so, as these stink bugs are feeding, they're not actually feeding on the little druplet itself. They're actually feeding in on the area between those druplets where they're attached to the core of that blackberry. But it just causes them to have a really bitter taste. And I had no idea that that was a potential cause for that. I really never understood it myself. But yeah, I just thought that was a neat thing. So look into that Arkansas Extension stink bug damage on blackberries.
yeah, good selection. Make sure that if this is in your control and it's, a cultivated variety, like irrigation, draining, fruit fill, and also and I completely agree with the stink bug. Once you like get that in your mind, you'll actually get a little bit of the stink bug smell in the fruit flavor. You're like, oh, I had a volunteer that was feeding in our helping us pick. And then when we got done, then we were, nibbling blackberries, and she was like, well, I went over there, it tasted really awful. I was like, did it taste a little bit like stink bug? And she was like, that's what it
Yes, that's what
that's
it
what it was.
was.
And you also, the other thing to keep in mind about picking blackberries is that our eyes will fool us, because we go out there and we will pick the biggest, shiniest, dark blackberry. And while they are still shiny, you can still get a pretty good push of that bitter component. And so the actual best taste as far as sweetness will actually be when they become a little bit more dull. So sometimes we can't trust our eye on that.
Make sure you're not tugging them off. You just want to barely touch them and they just fall. You don't want to force them off. Yes. Okay. We're at 9 o'clock. I mean, we're at 10 o'clock, but let's squeeze in one more fruit cut question. I think everybody was just having such a good time. We can do that. Okay, here we go. Knox County. Some of my peaches are decaying on the tree. Is there something that I can spray for this? Let me pull up it was an excellent picture, by the way. Thank you, question submitter, for sharing this photo with us. And fruit team, take us away.
Yep, we've got brown rot on that one. So brown rot's a fungus that occurs on all stone fruits. So that's peaches, nectarines, cherries. And that's, one of the main reasons it's almost, I won't say impossible, but it's pretty tough to grow organic peaches, because we've got to spray a potential cover spray to prevent this fungus from, first of all, overwintering, and then coming up upon successive seasons there too. So cultural practices that we can do, we can't leave this fruit hanging there. We want to actually remove these as best as possible, remove any mummified fruit that's on the ground or hanging on the tree, and completely get it off site, right? Because it's going to try to overwinter there in the soil. And then really important to get that pre-harvest spray about 2 to 3 weeks before harvest, and then 1 week before harvest. So that's 2 potential sprays of a product that we like to utilize called Captan. I'll drop in a link here in a moment of our spray schedule. But Captan's a great one that we can help to prevent this disease from drastically reducing our yields there on peaches there. And I know Greg, he's had this firsthand as well, so maybe he can say a little bit more to that.
I thought I clicked it off. So what I would say is, yeah, I've dealt with it, and this spring would have been really, really challenging just because of how much moisture we had and how frequent that moisture was. And it's just one that you've just got to spray, and you got to be on it. I ended up pruning my peach trees really close to the ground with a chainsaw, and I don't deal with them much anymore. So it's a very, very challenging disease to deal with. Before we get away, Natalie, there was one question that showed up in the chat deal about water and emitters that I think would probably be a good one. If you, how much water, how do we know how much water is being put out and collected, and what can we do to know what that is? I think that could actually be a very across the board, lawns, gardens, trees, etc. How do we know how much water we're putting out through these?
Yeah, now that was a good question, and one that honestly there's no like shortcut answer. If you have individual drip emitters around your landscape beds or something like that, then you kind of need to know what is the flow rate on that emitter, and you can check that. Put it in a gallon jug and run it for an irrigation cycle. When it comes to more drip lines in gardens and things like that, then you just kind of have to look at the product and say, okay, for 100 feet of this drip, how much does it apply for per hour? And then you have to then you have to back calculate and say, okay,
Yes.
gallons, what is the space that I am using this on, and then how many gallons, how does that coordinate to inches of water? So it's a great question, but we do have to do a little bit of background work, and products vary.
One redneck engineering that I always do: put a pan out there, set up a dummy emitter, that you're watering nothing but a pan and collect and see how much, so do the calculations, but like a soaker hose, run it over the top of a pan, and just collect how much water during that cycle. What did it put out? But most of that stuff, if you're using emitters and orchard tape, it does a pretty good job of telling you how much it will put out in a certain area in a certain time. So you can use those pretty easily, but soaker hoses can be a little more challenging. Sprinklers obviously be a little more challenging. I just use the old redneck engineering, put a pan out there, catch the water during the cycle and look and see. Will give you a really good idea.
And a lot of
we'll do
times-
an irrigation audit workshop for
Yes.
home vegetable
Yeah, I was gonna
gardens.
say,
That'd be fun.
We'll have all of our math ready, but what I can tell you is that lots of times it's less than you think. So for the specific drip tape that I use on the vegetable trial plots at the farm, to deliver an inch of water, I need to run those between 6 and 8 hours. And you're like, really? Yes. And this time of year, well, I just don't want to deliver an inch, right? I'm probably drying an inch and a half or something a week. So that's, like 12 hours or something of irrigation.
And so what you just said there, imagine a homeowner that waters for 15 minutes in the morning.
Yeah. Or even with trees, we're trying to get that soil profile 6 to 9 inches deep, wet. So how many hours are we talking there? So I jokingly say I use this redneck tool right here. Just, knock a piece of rebar in the ground 4 or 5 inches, stick your finger in. If it's bone dry down there, you probably need to water.
The good old finger test.
Awesome.
I'm
Y'all,
going to do one final shout out to one of our home garden variety trialers who sent in beautiful firecracker, sunflower. So,
So
yeah, we
pretty.
got some struggles out there, but there is some very happy, good gardening going on.
Well, we want to thank y'all for being here with us today. Thanks for sending in those questions. Keep rolling them in. So we've got some fun new content to talk about each month. We look forward to seeing you next month.